Colette's Corner.
Hi there, this is Colette from Colette Sewing Machines Plus in Yorkton, and welcome to Colette's Corner. Today on Colette's Corner, we are going to work on this cutie. The cutie frames have now arrived, and I've seen several different videos on how people put their quilts on the frame. And of course, there's never a right way and there's never a wrong way. It's the way that works best for you. So I have seen how others have put it on, and I've come up with a way that I like to put mine on. So we are going to go over that, and I'm actually going to put a quilt on the frame. Okay, as you'll notice here, I have the Cutie 15 Pro is what I have on my little cutie. Okay, but you can also put a domestic machine on this frame. The frame doesn't take up any room in your home at all. When you're not using it, if you wanted to take it down, you can just slide it under a bed, put it in a closet, so it's totally out of your way. You can just put it on one of those little fold-down tables. You can build your own table. You can set it up however you want. Here in the store, we just have it set up on our cutting and ironing station. It's a little bit high, but it's good for me because I'm tall, so you would set it at whatever height that you wanted it to be. Now, when you're working with the cutie, you can also use your domestic machine. So what you need to do when you're using your domestic machine is this carriage is going to come with the machine as well as this carriage right here. So this carriage will sit on top of this carriage, and then your machine sits on top of that. And here I'm using my handles to move my machine this way. When you're using your own domestic machine, you'll notice that there's handles on the end of this tray. I'm calling it a tray. It is a carriage, okay? So what you do here is you run it from in front of you here. Okay, so that's where you can determine how high or low. You can sit down and do it. You can stand up and do it. However, it works well with your own domestic machine. You can also get a stitch regulator for certain domestic machines and a power as well. So it just depends on what your machine is and if that is available. And that. You can also work from the back of the machine. You just pull these handles out. You'll see there's two holes at the back of the carriage there. You just slide them in from the carriage, and then you can work from the back of your machine as well. So it depends on what kind of quilting that you want to do. Okay, so this is what we will use when we're doing the domestic machine. So I'm just going to take this down because I'm not using the domestic today. I'm using the Cutie 15 Pro, like I had said earlier. With your frame, you get these clamps. Okay, so in this version of a frame, you're going to clamp your quilt on. So you're going to have two long clamps like this. You're going to have two short ones like this that go onto the side of your machine, and then you're going to have these three shorter ones, and these are the ones that go at the back. So if I only had a runner that I was putting on, I only need to use one clamp, because that's all the space that it's going to need to take up. But when I'm working on something larger, I'm going to use two, or I'm going to use three. Okay, so these are the clamps that are for the back of the machine. And we're going to get a little bit more into those clamps in a bit. What we're going to do right now is we're going to go over, and I'm going to show you how you prepare your quilt to be able to put it onto the frame. Okay, so of course you need your backing, your batting, and your top. These are going to get sandwiched together as if you were just going to go and do free motion on your own domestic machine at home. So what you need to do is you need to make sure that you have at least 8 to 10 inches at the top of your quilt and at least 8 to 10 at the bottom. Okay? As well, at the top, you're going to want to use at least 4 to 5 inches of batting you want to have showing, and at the bottom, the same thing. Okay, other ways that I've seen the quilt put on is the batting is only this wide at like only about 2 inches at the top of it. Then when you go to put it on the frame, there's nothing to clamp it to. So I found for my personal, instead of having all of this just fabric and a little bit of batting, I've added more batting so that I can clamp it, and there's a lot of beef there to clamp onto the frame itself. Okay, So, and then all I did was I used just my 505 temporary spray, and I spray basted all of my layers together. Okay, that's the easiest way to keep your layers together, because of course we're going to be lifting this thing up and we're going to be moving it around, so we want to be able to have it nice and secure. As well, I don't want pins all over the place here, because when I'm doing my free motion, I don't want to have to stop every time to take my pins out. So spray basting is the easiest way to go. Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're actually going to take this and we're going to put it on the frame. So I'm going to have you come and join me on the other side of the machine here so that you can see everything that I'm doing from the back. So I'm going to head over to the machine now, and then you can join me there. Okay, so now we're back at the machine here, and we're at the front of the machine now, not at the back of the machine. You'll notice here that I have this little sandwiched piece. And what I use this piece for is you always need to test your tensions. Because if you've changed threads or you know whatnot, even on your domestic machine, you first want to check and make sure that your tensions are good top and bottom. So you don't want to start out on your quilt to test that out. So just by cutting a piece like this, I just cut it this big so that I can use it over and over and over again. So you would just set this on the frame, do your test, check the back of it, make sure that all of your tensions are good and stuff, and then you would just take it off and put your quilt on. Okay? You don't have to make it as big as I made this one. You can just make it a strip. You just want to have something so that you then can test your tensions, because you don't want to start doing all of this quilt and then you go to move it and you look on the back of it and you have all this loose thread, or or your color from the top is showing to the back, that kind of thing. So it's always best to test your tension first before you start something, because you sure don't want to have to take it all out after you've gone along the whole top of a quilt. Okay? So the nice thing about this machine, this frame as well, is you can do any size of quilt on it that you want. You can do right from a small runner or a placemat all the way up to a king-size quilt, because you are now moving the quilt along instead of needing all of the space. So I'm just going to grab my quilt here, and we're going to bring it around to the front. And what I like to do is I like to bring the weight of my quilt up so that it's kind of sitting, inside my frame, so that I don't have something pulling back and forth on me all the time. So the first thing that you need to do is you just want to slide your quilt underneath the area that you're going to be quilting on. And we need to check and see if the machine right over here on the side, you don't want your machine, you can't have your machine any closer, like that, okay? So you need to figure out where your quilt is going to start in order for your machine not to be hitting the side of this frame all the time. So if we just stick our quilt underneath and figure out basically where it needs to go. So right here, if I were to stick it on the frame right there, I have plenty of room over here that it's not going to interfere, and that I can still stitch onto here without being over here, and then I can't get over to where I need to be. So for me on this particular machine, this is where I would need to set my quilt. Okay? And I've done a few quilts already, so I visually pretty much know where I need to set that thing. So after a while, you'll just get into recognizing how it needs to be set. So all I'm going to do here is I'm just going to straighten my quilt out now that I know where it needs to be. I'm just going to pop this up so that I don't have any weight there. And when you first put your quilt on, this is where you fiddle the most, is just this very first row, because after that, the weight of the quilt is going back and back and back. So here, when we first start, we have to make sure that we leave at least 2 inches before the top of the quilt, because other than that, our machine is going to touch the bar at the back, so you can't have it too close or you won't be able to quilt your quilt. So I'm just going to double check here, make sure that mine is sitting where I need it to be, and it is. And then I'm just going to grab one of my short clamps, and you'll notice on the clamp it says the word Cutie. Okay? So Cutie always has to face up. If Cutie faces this and it's upside down, then you're not going to be able to put your hooks on. So we're going to just take our clamp and we're just going to clamp it on. Okay, so there we go. We have our first clamp on already. You can see that I have enough room still to be able to go across the. Okay, so now I'm going to take my second clamp, and again I'm going to make sure that the cutie is facing up. And you're just going to make sure that when you visually look at this, that it's it's even, you know, all the way across. So then I'm just going to take my cutie, put it on there, and then take my last one again, double check, make sure that cutie is in the right direction. And I'm just going to clamp that on that way. So now we already have, I'm just going to bring this down just a hair there. There we go. Okay. And when we're quilting, we're only going to be able to quilt up to about here because, again, the machine's going to hit the bar and that. So just make sure that all of this space in here is nice and straight. Okay, so now what we can do is we can just let the quilt fall. And I'm just going to take the long clamps. And again, you want to make sure that your writing is facing you correctly. And you're just going to pop that on. Okay. And we're just going to pop this one on. You can see once you've got this top one on, these two just pop on with absolutely no problem at all. And then our little guy, you want to just pop him on to the end here, and there you go. Your quilt is already clamped and ready to go. Okay, I'm just going to tighten that just a hair there. There we go. Okay, so now it's all ready to go. So now what I can do is, if I'm using a domestic machine, because remember our handles sit underneath the frame here. So what I need to do if I'm using the domestic is I need to take my quilt and roll it up on the bottom like this. Okay. And then you're going to take your clamps from behind and you're going to clamp it. And you're going to do that all the way along. Okay? Because I'm using this machine, my handles are above ground. They're not below ground. Okay? So then I can just leave my quilt hanging. I don't need to worry about rolling my quilt up. But you do want to roll up your back. And you'll just bring these around so that your clamps are not swinging and in your way. And of course, this first roll, there's barely anything there to roll because it's just that little bit of the top of the quilt. When you start going and moving along, of course, that roll is going to get larger and larger. So at this point in time, all this really does is keeps my clamps from, you know, floating around. Okay? So now what you're going to do is you want to baste your quilt down. Now, I've already checked, and I know that my tension is where I want it to be. So I'm just, got to go on this side. Got to do my needle down, needle up. Okay, because regardless if you are using a domestic machine or or the Pro or any one of the larger machines, you need to bring your thread to the surface. If you don't bring your thread to the surface, just like when you're doing free motion on your machine, it's just going to all ball up at the back and cause you all kinds of headache. So make sure that you bring your thread up to the surface. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go backwards, and then I'm going to go over, and I'm going to stop right about here because, of course, my machine is going to hit the frame if I go any further. So this is the space that I want to be working in. Now, if you don't want to tack across the top of your quilt, or up the side, because you have spray basted it, it's pretty secure anyways, but it's just something that I've always done. So, and I always go backwards versus forwards, so that if your quilt has too much border in it, you know how sometimes you'll have a little more than you want, then you can, by going backwards, you're not pushing your quilt forward the entire time, and then when you get to the bottom, you have a mess, okay? So it's best to go backwards. So I'm going to try to do this so that I'm not in your way. So I'm just going backwards here like this. Okay, and once I get to the top, I'm just going to stop, and then I'll go along the top this way as well. Okay, so we're going to do that. Move this along. Okay, and I'm watching over here so that I don't go, whoops, I'm trying to talk to you at the same time. I made a little bit of a mess there. But I only want to go as far as my machine. So right now, I can go up to basically here, okay? Now I've got room to continue to stitch, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to break my thread, and I'm going to come back here because I personally like to stitch from this way for my start, okay? And then we're going to leave the needle in, and we're actually going to pull our fabric over this way so that we can continue our stitching, okay? So I'm just going to break my thread there, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to do the next step. Okay, so now I'm just doing a basic meander. You could put a design on here if you chose to, but I'm just going to do the basic meander, and I'm just going to take it over to as far as I can on the quilt before I need to move it. You can see already this is 10 times faster than doing it on your machine if you were doing free motion. So we're just going to go across, and we're going to stop when we get to, I'm going to go basically down to here, and then I'm going to stop, okay? So I'm going to leave my needle up at the top there so that it holds it into position for me while I slide my quilt off to the side. So I'm just going to take my clamps off here. Now I've noticed in other people, the videos that I've watched, they bring their needle up and they move the machine off to the side and then take their clamps off and then deal with their quilt. I like to leave my needle in. I just think it's easier for me if I do that. So I'm just going to pop these clamps off. Get these ones off at the bottom here. And then all I need to do then is I just need to pull my quilt down this way because I've already kept my needle where it needs to be. And I just need to then decide how far down do I need to go in order for my machine not to hit the frame here. So I'm going to bring mine down to right about here because once we get to this point here, there's only so much to quilt anyway, so it doesn't matter how far down you pull it. And then I'm just going to pop my smaller clamps on again, and remember, Cutie has to face you. So we're just going to stick these on. And you see by having the machine there, it has held my quilt into position for me as well. And we got one more here that we're going to slide on and make sure that our Cutie is facing up. And then our small clamp this time is going to go on this side. Okay, so now my quilt is clamped on the top and the bottom, or pardon me, on the sides and the top. So now I'm just going to pop my clamps on to the bottom rail. Okay, and now you can see that I'm ready to go. So I'm just going to pull this a little bit tighter just so that we have our tightness there. You're then going to roll up whatever bit of quilt that you have here and bring it around. Just get one more here. Okay. So now if I chose to, I could continue going across the top here like this and then, you know, go down the side here. But because I've spray basted this and that, I'm just going to continue. I'm just going to continue to go. So. I just kind of work in an upward, downward trail. Whatever trail is comfortable for you is the trail that you would use, okay? Now when I come to the end of this, I'm wanting to stop. I can't quilt and talk at the same time. I'm wanting to stop at the bottom. I don't want to stop at the top because I want to be able to shift my quilt. So I'm just going to come down. Come down as far as I can. And I'm going to stop here at the bottom, because I want my needle to stop here so that when I bring my quilt back this way, again, I have my needle down in my work to be able to slide back. Okay, so now I'm just going to pop these off again. And we'll take these clamps off here. And you will see when I move this up that the next time that you actually roll a quilt at the top here, you're going to have a lot more in that area than you do now. Okay? So now that's all off. I'm going to do again what I did last time. I'm going to leave my needle down in my machine like this, and I'm just going to pull my quilt back like this. Okay? And I'm going to pull it back till I have, again, a couple of inches here. Go back a little bit further. Okay, and then I'll just pop my clamps on like we did before, and I'm just going to pop them on all the way. Then I'll come back and I'll quilt to as far as I can go this way, leave my needle down, pull my fabric over, and do the same thing. And then we're going to pull back. So you're just going to continue to do the same thing until you get your entire quilt quilted. So you can see that it's not hard to get your quilt on. Like I had said previously, that very first row that you do can be a little finicky, just making sure that everything is where it needs to be, you know, and it might slide down a little bit on you, or, you know, or something like that. But you can see how easy this has been for me to get this quilt on here. And then I'm just going to pop my bar on here and on here. Let's give it a push. Okay, so there we are. We're ready to go to our next row, and we're just going to get this stuff out of the way. So I've just rolled it up, and you can see that it's fuller than my first roll that I did. Make sure we get all of them here. Yeah, here we go. There's one more here. Okay, so you've clamped it. You've done what you needed to do. Now, when I didn't go across the top there earlier, and now I wish I would have, I would take that and stitch the top down and come down to the side. It's easier to do that, and then you don't have to worry about catching your quilt or anything, because some people like to come off the edge of their quilt a little bit as well. So right now I would break my thread, come to the bottom here and back up, and then go across as far as I can go, move my quilt down, leave my needle in position, move my quilt down, and then come out again. Okay, so that's how you quilt a quilt on the Cutie. It is an amazing little frame. It's lightweight, easy to use, and again, you can either use your domestic machine, or if you wanted to do a step up, you can go to the Unique 15, or you can go to the full-size Unique as well. This frame will handle right up to the full-size machine, okay? You can also, if you choose to in the future, you can put automation as well. So you can put automation on the machine and let the machine do the work for you. So this frame does not stop you from continuing on and growing, okay? So that is the Cutie. Thank you so much for joining me today on Colette's Corner. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. I would really appreciate that. It helps me a lot. So goodbye for now.